Chapter 20. The Banu Qaynuqa Campaign. At the time when Prophet Muhammad emigrated to Medina, virtually half of the city's population consisted of Jews from the Banu Nadir, Banu Qaynuqa, and Banu Qurayza tribes. It is not known for certain when the Jews began to settle in the Arabian Peninsula, or more specifically in Medina. There are also views holding that the Jews in the Arabian Peninsula did not come from outside, but were Arabs who had accepted Judaism. It is generally accepted that they came to the peninsula from abroad. However, there are differing views on the exact time of their arrival. According to some narrations, Jews that had been expelled from Palestine following either the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II's 605 to 562 BC occupation of Jerusalem and the subsequent destruction of the Temple of Solomon, or in later attacks settled in various regions of the Arabian Peninsula such as the Hejaz, Wadi al-Qura, Khaybar, Taima, Yathrib and Ayla. Those who came into Yathrib first settled in the city's outskirts, and later, increasing in strength, expelled the Amalika and Jurhum tribes residing therein, and like so gained control of the city. Following the Great Flood, Thayl al-Arim in Yemen during the 2nd century AD, the leader of the Azd branch of the Qahtani tribes, Harith ibn Thalaba ibn Amr Muzakiyah, emigrated from Yemen with his tribe and settled in the outskirts of Yathrib. Over time, his descendants, the Aus and Khazraj tribes, gained ascendancy over the Jews and gained control of the city. Losing their dominance to the Aus and Khazraj, the Jewish tribes continued their existence in the region, with some siding with the Aus and others with the Khazraj in disputes that arose between them. In the Battle of Buhath, for instance, which broke out 5 years before the emigration, 617 AD, the Banu Qurayza and Banu Nadir Jews formed alliances with the Aus, while the Banu Qaynuqa sided with the Khazraj. The ensuing battle ended with the defeat of the Khazraj. On the other hand, there were also various disputes and conflicts between the Banu Qaynuqa and the other Jewish tribes. In contrast to the situation in a political arena, the Jewish tribes were much more influential than the Arab tribes economically. Agriculture, trade, ironworking, arms manufacture, textiles and jewelry making were all in the hands of the Jewish tribes. The Banu Qaynuqa was famous for jewelry making, the Banu Nadir in agriculture, and the Banu Qurayza in the leather trade. The Jewish tribes had become wealthy by participating in trade fairs, and when they could not collect the money that they had loaned with interest, they would impound the assets and estates of debtors, and as such began to live in prosperity. In addition, there were also those who made money from fortune-telling and soothsaying. The Jews also owned an education and teaching centre, Bayt al-Midras, in Medina. It is known that Prophet Muhammad and some of his companions visited this centre for the purpose of conveying the message of Islam. The Banu Qaynuqa, who resided in Medina's southwest, lived in fortresses, utum, which were found throughout the city. Known among Medina's Jewish tribes for its bravery and militancy, the Banu Qaynuqa made its living from trade, arms manufacture and jewelry making in particular. For this reason, they did not possess agricultural land. They owned a marketplace in Medina called the Souk al-Banu Qaynuqa, used by both Jews and Muslims. It was due to these activities that the Banu Qaynuqa were wealthier than the other Jewish tribes. The Banu Qaynuqa Jews joined the pact that Prophet Muhammad made with Medina's Arab and Jewish tribes, known as the Constitution of Medina, as an ally of the Khazraj tribe. With this pact, it was envisaged that in the event of any attack on Medina, the Jewish tribes too would join the defence, with an attack on any tribe being considered an attack on all the others and all parties responding in unison. And that furthermore, the Jews would not side with the Quraysh or the other enemies of the Muslims. The attitude that Prophet Muhammad adopted towards the Jews in Medina yielded certain positive results, with one of the prominent scholars at the Banu Qaynuqa, Abdullah ibn Salam, and his family accepting Islam. However, despite threatening members of the Aus and the Khazraj with their assertions that they would follow the Prophet to appear in the near future, and that they would thus gain an advantage over his enemies, they refused to accept the prophethood of Prophet Muhammad because he was not from among them. Furthermore, they took particular steps in order to turn Muslims away from their religion, from time to time mocking the Quran and the Prophet. Dredging up the old rivalry and hostility between the Aus and the Khazraj, they attempted to cause dissension, thus inciting the hypocrites. Some of them stated that they accepted Islam, but joined the ranks of the hypocrites. The Muslims' triumph over the Meccan polytheists at the Battle of Badr, despite their small numbers, disturbed the Jews. They made their annoyance clear in various ways and began creating an uproar. Gathering the Jews at the Banu Qaynuqa market in response, the Prophet Muhammad told them that he was a messenger sent by God and that they ought to take their lesson from all that befell the Quraysh. The Prophet asked them to accept Islam. However, the Jews had the audacity to suggest that the Prophet not be deceived by his victory over the Quraysh, who had little understanding of the art of war, and that he would see what war really was and how fierce an enemy they were if they were to fight against them. There are accounts which state that the Quranic verses revealing that the disbelievers would shortly be defeated with the help of God by drawing attention to the Battle of Badr were revealed in relation to this response at the Banu Qaynuqa. While this tension continued, an incident occurring in the Banu Qaynuqa marketplace proved to be the final straw. A Muslim woman from the helpers who went to a jeweller in the market was harassed by those Jews present there. Upon the woman's calling for help, another Muslim rushed to her aid and, unable to contain himself, attacked and killed the Jewish jeweller, a member of the Banu Qaynuqa. The Jews then killed this man. Demonstrating the insignificance and present invalidity of the pact signed earlier, this incident simultaneously weighed very heavily on Prophet Muhammad and the Muslims. The Prophet began to feel concerned that the Banu Qaynuqa, the first among the Jewish tribes to violate the pact, could behave treacherously at any time. Upon this, the verse declaring that should the Prophet have strong reason to fear treachery from those with whom he had treaty, he could publicly dissolve the pact was revealed. 20 months after the emigration, from mid-Shawwal onwards, Prophet Muhammad laid siege to the quarter where the Banu Qaynuqa resided, appointing Abu Lubaba ibn Abdul Mundir as his deputy. The Prophet himself wore the armour known as Zat al-Fudul and handed the white standard to his uncle Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib. While no combat occurred, nor any arrow drawn in a siege that lasted 15 days up to the beginning of Thal-Qadar, the Banu Qaynuqa Jews were compelled to surrender when they remained shut off in their fortresses and all their connections with the outside world were completely severed. They also consented to the ruling that the Prophet was to make. He had refused their request to be released. Upon the Prophet's deciding that the male warriors among the prisoners of war, said to number about 700, were to be put to death, the leader of the Khazraj, Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, declared that the Banu Qaynuqa were their allies, that they had helped them, especially during the Battle of Bu'ath, and asked that the Prophet forgive them. Although Prophet Muhammad knew that Abdullah ibn Ubay was the leader of the hypocrites, in the face of his persistent petitions, he revoked his decision for the men to be killed and ordered that all the Banu Qaynuqa be expelled from Medina, leaving their possessions behind to the Muslims. Giving the Banu Qaynuqa a period of 3 days to vacate the city, the Prophet assigned Muhammad ibn Maslama to receive their possessions, and Ubadah ibn Samit to oversee their departure until they were well away from the city. In the meantime, upon the Banu Qaynuqa's request, they were granted permission to collect their debts. The Prophet also stated that the Banu Qaynuqa could always come to Medina to carry out their business, and stay therein for up to 3 days. Leaving a great many armaments and materials for arms manufacture behind them, the Banu Qaynuqa left Medina under the watchful eye of Ubadah ibn Samit. After staying in Wadi al-Qura for a month, they later went to Syria and settled along the Syrian border. After taking 3 swords, 3 spears, 2 suits of armour and 2 bows, and 1/5 of the war spoils, hummus, Prophet Muhammad divided the remaining 4/5 among the Muslims. He also gave a suit of armour each to Muhammad ibn Maslama and Sa'id ibn Mu'adh. While there are debates concerning when hummus was first implemented in Islamic history, there are views to the effect of its first being applied during the distribution of war spoils from the Banu Qaynuqa campaign. However, with due consideration to narrations regarding the earlier expedition of Abdullah ibn Jahsh and the distribution of spoils from the Battle of Badr, it is accepted that hummus was previously applied according to existing traditions and that its first application after the revelation of the relevant Quranic verse, in chapter An-Anfal, was after the Banu Qaynuqa campaign. One of the significant problems that Prophet Muhammad experienced while in Medina was the dissension created by a band of hypocrites. Leading the group of those pretending to be Muslim despite not believing in Islam or in the prophethood of Muhammad was Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul. Chieftain of the Khazraj, Abdullah ibn Ubay was promised control of Medina at the cessation of hostilities between the Aus and Khazraj tribes. But this had come to nothing when the Prophet emigrated to Medina. It was precisely for this reason that he bore an unending enmity towards the Prophet, lasting until his death. The Jews living in the city and the Maccan polytheists incited this hostility of his. Advising their townspeople against supporting the emigrants, Abdullah ibn Ubay, together with all the other hypocrites, wanted to ensure that they left the city. The hypocrites were always in favour of dissension in the many incidents that arose in the Medinan period, and attempted ceaselessly to weaken the solidarity of the Muslims. The 63rd chapter of the Quran, entitled The Hypocrites, was revealed in relation to this faction and those similar ones.